Today we're going to learn how to put an image together from our primary data for a figure for either publication or a grant submission. Hopefully we'll manage to do this without corrupting our primary data and everything will be swell. Watch this space and let's do some more stuff. This represents the directory structure favored. You have a directory for each project, and within each project you have further subdirectories where you store your data. You should always maintain a discrete place for all of your raw data, and that should be files that you never change. You make copies of your raw data and then you can transfer them off into the directories that you'll use to build your figures and manipulate the images in that environment to get the desired layered and unlayered image files. Here we work through the Mac system to accomplish the same thing. I have a directory for my research in which I've created Project 1 folder. Within there, I have a folder to build my figure. I have subdirectories of that folder, one of which contains my raw data, where I can take my images, make copies of those images, and move it into the subdirectory called modified data. In the modified data directory, I will manipulate the images and generate many other types of images for further use. We're going to import our files into Photoshop. Here, this will be the environment in which we will modify or change the files to generate our figure. I move all of the files in the approximate orientation that I will use when I'm actually building the figure, so that I have a good look at what it's going to look like right from the first blush. Here, we're going to examine the size of our files, which in this instance are all approximately the same, and work out what kind of size of figure file I'm going to need that's going to be able to hold all 4 files with room to spare. And we use this box to change the width and height of the new file that we're going to make. Now we're going to copy all of our image files into the larger file to make our figure. As you can see, this is done by selecting the entirety of the image area using the copy command and then pasting it into our larger document. We then move it into its relative position for the figure in which we want to build. This process is repeated for all of the other 3 images that we have for our simple figure here. All of them, we will select the entirety of the image and we will cut and then paste it into the larger document. As we do this, we will maintain the orientation that we wish for the images to appear in the final figure. As we're importing these images into our figure document, I try to maintain equal spacing between the images, both left and right, and up and down. By aligning the images in this way, make sure that your final product will have a professional look. In the next clip, we'll see the use of bars in order to make sure that we maintain this clean look for your final document. Here we're going to build bars or a framework in order to properly align our images to maintain a professional look. In this instance, I've made my bars white in color, but you can use any color that you particularly want depending on the contrast with the images in the background. These will be built up into its own layer, and then the layer itself may be discarded after its use is finished. In Photoshop, text and shapes need to be rasterized in order to form a proper layer. In the unrasterized condition, they may still be edited. However, once they are rasterized, they form a completely locked layer which no longer may be modified. Rasterized layers may be combined or merged together to form one single layer. Here, a reference cross may be discarded as a complete layer when we've finished with it. In this clip, we're going to address the layers that comprise the lettering for our figure panels. We select the font and the font size desired for our letters, and using the text tool, we place it in the approximate location in our figure where we want it to be. We use the arrow move tool to position the letter accordingly. This process is repeated for all of the letters required for our figure panel. As we conduct this process, you will see on the right hand side the letter layers are starting to accumulate in our layer window. If desired, you can also build a small positioning cross for aligning your text within the corners of your figure panels, much in the same way of the larger bars that were conducted earlier. next part of our process is to rasterize each of the letter layers. This will allow them to be locked, and this in turn allows us to merge those layers together to form a single letter layer. Once every letter layer has been rasterized, then all such layers may be merged down into each other to form a single letter layer. The rationale here is to have one layer that may be edited for different journals' font requirements or discarded at will, instead of having to rebuild an entire figure. Here's a wee tip. As you're building your draft document, include the font information into the letter layer somewhere off-site on your image, and that way you'll be able to replicate it into the future. One of the worst things is trying to figure out what is that font that you have on there so that you can make all of your figures consistent. It's time to save your layered file. So this is saved as a Photoshop document or PSD file. This preserves all the layer information. The only trouble with this particular file type is that it is very large, which is why your final product that you're going to generate will be a compressed JPEG file, which will be much smaller. Always ensure that you maximize compatibility when you're saving your PSD file within the Photoshop environment. In order to save your file as a JPEG document, it must be flattened. This is done as indicated. Here, we are now going to crop this document so that we capture all the information that we want, and we constrain the size to something that looks a little bit better. This is done with the selection tool and then with the crop tool. Now that we have cropped our document, time for a little tidy up to remove that little font information at the very bottom. This is done using the select tool and simple delete. Now that we've done all that, we're going to save our image as a high quality JPEG. We're going to save as, and we're going to select the file type. Instead of the format of Photoshop as shown here, it's now going to be changed to JPEG. You may retain the file name as the format extension will have changed. Photoshop now asks you for quality, and you want the highest quality available. And you're good! Now, as you can see from our directory structure, we have two new files. We have a JPEG and a PSD. They're significantly different in size. Over 300 KB is the size of our JPEG, and our equivalent PSD is 2.4 meg. That is why you should never email PSD files to anyone.